The new WRX is a polarizing sports sedan in the car world right now. So today I'm going to try to tread through the hot takes and hate to highlight the car's standout attributes and some of its downfalls as well. If you're looking for a full review, I will have that out here soon and I'll link it in the description when it's released. And this is typically the part where I go over the changes for the new upcoming model year. However, Subaru has not announced anything yet and I would expect the changes to be very minimal for 23. And before we jump into this, if you enjoy fun, detailed car content without all the fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. The first thing I'm going to mention, and this is the best part about the new WRX, is that it is more agreeable, and this is kind of a two-sided reason, and you'll understand why here in a second. For 2022, you have an engine that's not as peaky as it was in years prior. This has been the source of some criticism too, as on paper we see the same torque and just 3 more ponies, but this feels more usable outside of peak boost and gets down to business a little quicker, despite the similarities on the spec sheet. And if you want to feel better about buying a WRX, consider shopping at Royal on the Eastside in Bloomington, Indiana, the friendly dealer that let me try out this new WRX in one of the few places that refuses to mark up any of their new cars. If you're in the market, check them out. Anyway, the power delivery in here feels more responsive and consistent without providing any more thrust. But if you knew about the old WRX, that was not the only bit of things that needed a little bit of smoothing out. The next part for me was the clutch. It used to be one of the more unforgiving manual experiences left on the road today. It really took quite the finesse and some practice to make the thing drive smoothly, which I guess was part of the reward of the older car. But this new clutch still bites pretty hard. It's just easier to modulate. And when you're shifting from, say first to second, just driving normally, it's a lot easier to have a seamless transition of power. And I think the shifter was also smoothed up a little bit, but that could also just be up in my head here. That notchy feel is still left over from the previous generation. But one thing that isn't a carryover is the suspension. That is also noticeably more comfortable. And it doesn't come at the sacrifice of performance. Subaru played around with sway bar mounting points. This rides on the new Subaru Global architecture, which is stiffer. So they didn't need to make the suspension like a rock in order to minimize body roll. And the result of all of these things, and especially that suspension, is a car that's easier to drive day in and day out without a sacrifice in performance or character. And that's the next thing that I really love about this generation of WRX. It still has that very unique personality that's been attributed to the nameplate for quite some time now. It's the sledgehammer of the segment. So it still rides like a stiff rally car. The shifter still has that rocky feel to it. There's actually a little bit of turbo lag, which kind of still builds into that turbocharged nostalgic experience. I think Subaru did a remarkable job of treading the line between going too soft and losing the Rexness and not addressing the low points of the previous car that pushed away some buyers. And one thing that always did draw people into this Subi was the all-wheel drive. It's still a standout feature for the segment because really, at this price point, you have the GTI, you have the Elantra N, and the Civic SI. All good cars, but also all front-wheel drive. It offers an aggressive grip on the road that feels like it could choke a bear. And with these summer performance tires, it really overinflates your confidence to Corvette guy levels. And that kind of leads me to the next and most comprehensive reason that the WRX is still a great option in the class, and that's performance, and you would expect this. You're going to have an insane level of acceleration, especially if you can get that launch right, which can be tricky, but is easier than in years past, in my opinion, especially with the aggressive gearing. And this also doesn't have an egregious amount of rev hang. The pedals are spaced nicely for heel-toe downshifting for taller people. The brake feel is good. The stock seats do a great job of holding you in. And with that all-wheel drive, it feels like you can accelerate at any point in time, mid-corner, and not be punished. Yes, I wouldn't argue that this would be the fastest in the class around a more technical track. It's just not all that precise and natural feeling with the steering, and that's one of the downsides to this thing. But it still feels incredibly capable on imperfect back roads, and I'm sure it has big potential on the track too. It's a shame we won't see an STI on this platform for a while, since that spec has gone on a green-seeking hiatus. And my last reason for the WRX is resale value. Even before the insane price gouging that we're seeing in the market currently, the WRX held its value like a West Coast home. And while I think pretty much any car in this segment, especially with a manual transmission, is going to hold its value pretty well in the forthcoming years, this is one advantage that the WRX has held over a lot of its competitors for a pretty long time. And I also want to talk reliability. Yes, this model is way too new for me to give you any real predictions here, but the powertrain has a little bit of history. The transmission, whenever the last generation WRX was released, had some notable clutch issues, and then for 2018 they did some revisions, including some carbon synchros for first and second gear, and we haven't heard very many problems since. And the engine as well. This is the FA24. The FA20 was used in the previous generation, and that was a pretty reliable engine when unmodified. The 2.4 liter debuted in the 2019 Ascent and has also been reliable so far outside of initial AC problems in the Ascent. The previous gen WRX had its own fair share of AC woes, along with some people reporting a parasitic draw on the battery. Really, outside of those things, it just seems like there's small miscellaneous issues, but if there are any 2015 plus WRX owners watching this, please list any common repairs in the comments section below. And I want to close this video out with the negatives to the new WRX. First and foremost, I was disappointed with the steering and that they didn't really improve that, make it feel a little bit more natural. I mean, just hopping in the Mazda CX-5 earlier this week, yes, that feels nowhere near as capable as this car, but I still thought the steering felt more predictable. So I truly hope Subaru puts a little bit more attention to this. The next thing I would say is probably road noise. It's noisier than I was expecting, not like from the engine. That actually doesn't sound too bad, especially at idle. It's got a little burble to it. But it's just wind and tire noise. It's more pronounced. It kind of just sounds like a cheaper small car from 5-10 years ago versus something that can now cost upwards of $40,000. The next thing I would say is interior quality. It's not appalling, and this is a base model, so you're gonna expect some cheaper materials here, but really it just gets blown away even by the base GTI when it comes to upscale appointments at a reasonable price. One thing that I think is partially a downfall is that you don't have active safety equipment on the manual transmission models. Hold for blind spot monitoring if you step up to the limited. The reason why I think this could be a positive is that the CVT models are $2,000 more expensive than the manuals. And some of that cost definitely has to come down to the extra equipment there. So for a lot of manual transmission buyers out there, they don't really care about those active safety features, but having autonomous braking in a car that's designed to be able to handle performance and family duties would be kind of nice. And that's another issue. I think that the rear seat space and trunk space is just a bit tight for a car this size. I think the Impreza is notably better. Really, I have enough legroom. I'm 6'3", but my head, is just hitting the roof. The trunk is also more compromised. There are more practical in the segment. The next and the biggest financial downside to the WRX is the gas mileage and premium fuel requirement. Most other cars in the class do require 91 octane and up. However, most of those cars also get better than 22 miles per gallon combined. And while I can't really consider this a negative because looks are all subjective, the sports sedan gone rock climbing look hasn't really grown on me yet. And then the last thing that upsets me is the new GT trim, because you get things like the Recaro seats and the Sport Adaptive Dampening. Those are exclusive to the GT trim, but you can't get it with 3 pedals, only the CVT. So as you can tell, I have an overall positive outlook on the new WRX, but it kind of depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. If you like the previous car, but wished it was a little bit more forgiving, the new WRX is perfect. But if you're comparing it to more refined and playful competitors, it might let you down a little bit. But watch my full review for more thoughts and details, and tell me what you guys think of the new Rex in the comments section. Not a f***ing dog. He looked like he's on a mission. If I've learned anything, if you see a German Shepherd running around, don't, come here, baby. That's a good way to not exist anymore. Anyway, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and help me with my ongoing efforts to conquer the YouTube algorithm. If you want to see more, subscribe and hit the bell. And thank you to my very loyal Patreons.